you growing up in, yeah, thank you, Anthony. Yeah, you growing up in Cuba and like what me and Anthony talked about the other day, well, they show us graphic pictures of Cuba, but it's not what it's always different. And it's good
So one,
to
sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you go ahead.
Uh, One of the things that I find kind of funny is that whenever a personality like Obama visits Cuba, there is a very strict rule about where the camera records. And so what they do is they only paint the buildings up to second floor or third floor, and the camera is not allowed to record beyond that because it's a mess. So there's it's kind of funny how those things happen over there, but the media here refuses to really report what happens in Cuba and how
Mhm.
oppressed people are and all the abuse that's taking place against the people.
Wow. That
Right.
is
Because
amazing. I was just like listening to how you come from those controlled environments to where you are today. When you were transitioning with your father, what was one of the, I guess I like to ask people, what's your competitive advantage? But you were definitely caring for your father and your family, but something made you keep going. Something made you say, I'm going to find a way. I'm going to finish. I'm going to get through. What would you say that would be about you?
Well, one of the things about my life is that I've never ever in my life had any doubts that God exists, because without him, I don't know where I would be. I don't know where my family would be. Um, a lot of people in Cuba end up going crazy, uh,
Amen.
clinically insane. And this is because the pressure is way too much. There's pressure on several fronts: mental, emotional, and financial. And so my mom being left with three kids, one was 21 days old when my dad was taken to prison, and all of us all of a sudden having to grow up very quickly and realizing we had a responsibility to help take care of our families at the age of 6. There is no way I would have been able to endure that and come out sane without knowing there is a God and without knowing there is hope for tomorrow. And we always had that hope, and my dad also taught me to have that hope. Just as an example, and this was a big deal to me, and
Mhm.
it may sound kind of simple, but at night, it was nighttime is when the hunger really hits you.
Right, right.
It's the worst time. So I would be crying at night sometimes, and I would tell my dad I wanted something good. I didn't know how to express myself at the time very well, but it must have been very frustrating for a parent to l- see their child like that. And my dad would just turn to me and say, I know what you want. And one day you're gonna have that and plenty more. So it was that vision and that faith that he kept and transferred over to us in
Mhm.
a way that really kept us going.
That's good. You just hit it when you said faith, that faith. And that's one of my favorite quotes. I got a lot of quotes, so don't look different at me when I start spurring off these quotes. But I tell Tyron all the time, we're generating and creating this podcast, and faith realizes the ability to see the invisible and believe the incredible. And your father saw what you are today, and he believed it. And that's so incredible. That's the reason you're sitting in front of us, because we want people like you to be spotlighted in this world, and you need to be heard. I was telling Tyrone a little bit about your story as you went for a political endeavor earlier. Can you expand on that when it comes to your faith and your belief?
Sure. So there's a lot of concerns that I've had throughout the years, living in the area that I live in Kansas City, and seeing all the crime firsthand, being just feet away from shootings many, many times. It's one of my biggest concerns, and I haven't moved away from that area that is like that today. I want to stay here. This is our ground. This is where where we should make a stand. And so all these concerns and the way that things have been handled, they motivated me to want to do something. I wish really, really good people, faithful people with a strong character would go into these offices, and not just that type of sector, but also entertainment and many other sectors. And so I figured if I'm not doing anything, then I shouldn't complain, but I want to be able to have a voice. So I'm gonna do something about it. And that was my way of thinking at the time. So I decided 4 months before an election that I was gonna run for office. I had no idea what I had to do to even
Wow.
get on the ballot. I had no clue. So I had to figure out everything. I had no money for this. I had no team of people. It was just truly by faith.
Your
And
heart.
so, yeah, and so I started figuring things out. One of my favorite things that happened in the middle of the campaign was that a blog, Tony's Casey, published the funding that each candidate had at the time. And there was a total of 5 candidates, including me, and they all had over $60,000 or more, up to $100,000 each. And I had 330 some dollars in my campaign funds. I ended up doing the entire campaign on a little less than $4,000. And just as I needed something, the money would come in just for that out of nowhere. And I came in third place. The people who came in fourth and fifth ended up spending close to $60,000 and still lost to me. And um and I was very close to the second place. So that, to me, it says several things. One, people want some change. And two, you don't need a lot of money to win. We don't need to spend $20,000 or anything like that on a campaign. I only had 4 months to achieve this. So I also knew I had a very, very secure feeling that God had me and that God was doing something. So I was completely unafraid the whole time. Not because I'm that brave, it's just because I had that security that God had my back.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Your story is so powerful. I don't know you, but what I know about you, you have greatness in you. And I mentioned it before when we initially met. You should run because what we talked about was your hurdles or the things that don't go the way you expect or intend are lessons. And so this isn't anything but a lesson that now you get to learn what you can do better and propel you to. You mentioned 2 to 3 from 1 to from winning at such a short notice. You have to know this is where you belong. You belong here. You're here for a reason. You're saving this community. And there are people here who born and raised and don't have the courage, don't have the drive, don't have the motivation, don't have the desire, and don't have the heart, and don't have the values that you're presenting to us right now. So I'm gonna be a cheerleader. I would say go for it again. Whatever you got to learn, whatever support you need, we're here to help. So that's
I
amazing.
appreciate that.
I'm just honored to be in your presence, for one.
Kudos and likewise, because like you said, you've been doing it for 4 months, and now you taking on this role against those who probably have more connections. That's all that is. It's not what you know, is who you know. I used to, not to get off subject, I used to work at City Hall. So I used to be in those city council meetings or whatnot, and piggyback to what Anthony talked about. It there's a lot of people that don't know how to express themselves. We had a lady a while back, she said the same thing. She ran for was that third district city council, as Chrissy Dastrip. She said the same thing. A lot of her peers, they had good ideas, but they didn't know how to express themselves. And by you coming on and saying at a very, very young age how you express yourself, and that's to me that takes a lot of boldness to do that. So I'm like Anthony, I applaud you, commend you. We support you because that's what it's all about. And it's all about who you know. And listen to me when I say this. Those people that are in office, a lot of times they don't know how to ask for help or the right questions. So I'm just leaving it at that. But like I said, I applaud you to come here to Kansas City. Piggyback to what Anthony talked about, you are in the right place at the right time. And we can't see it, but we can see it through your lens, what you see that's needed. So I applaud you. Well, we applaud you. I don't want to talk too much. I'm gonna turn this light on.
I really
For a second.
appreciate that.
Yeah, you have a vision. So you mentioned about Humana, and then transitioning. You were doing some work and you were busy sharing your purpose, your gift, and they wanted to bring you aboard, but you had to figure out how to transition. Can you speak a little bit about that?
So when I started with Humana, you mean?
Yes. Well, even before you started, but you were doing some volunteering, you were working, but they also wanted to bring you on. So they decided you all partnered up, and eventually you got to this place where now you work primarily with them, and you still do your volunteer work because it's a part of your gift and purpose.
Yeah, I had worked with the team, the Humana team, before, and they liked the way that I worked, and they had been throwing around the idea of hiring me for a while. What really pushed me to accept the offer was that I had decided around the same time that I was going to run for office, and accepting that position would give me more flexibility to do that during the training period. Um, so that's another one of those things of perfect timing where God just puts things into the right place. And it's been a blessing, really.
If that's good. So if you had to mention, I know your father and mother and your family definitely had a lot to do with this faith in God. How far back you don't really have to go as far as back if you know that was a part of who you are, and everything you do is based off of how God is going to help you through. Speak to that a little bit.
So do you mind rephrasing the question?
So like you're a faith-based person, and every time there's a challenge or if there's a space you need to enter before you just you definitely make sure God is in the midst of your decision making. And so where did that come from? How far back then you can remember? How did you, I know your father and your mother and your family probably, that's their values, but if you can go back to where you think you recall it coming into play, the beginning.
Sure. Well, being in a place where you don't know where your next meal is gonna come from, or if you're gonna have a pair of shoes tomorrow, that really restructures your entire mentality about life. And so, just to give you an example, when there were nights when the only thing we had to eat was rice, and all we could do was pray. And so I would be running to my grandmother's house after praying, and I would find 14 Cuban pesos on the ground. And now we had enough money to buy just enough eggs for dinner that night. So things like that would happen all the time. Like God really gave us what we needed to survive. And it was one of those things where like you had to believe, you had no choice but to believe, because he would come through every single time. Um, I my take on that, my perception is that it's sometimes easier um for a culture or a community in a third world to have this type of faith than it is for a first world community, because there is there's so many options here. There's so many conveniences, so many comforts that you don't have to really rely on God at that level. If on your daily life, you have your car, you have your car insurance, you have your home insurance, your health is insured. And we didn't have any of that. We didn't have any insurance for health. If you go to a hospital in Cuba, there's no medicine, and people die from simple infections because there's no antibiotics sometimes, or anesthesia, or even the tools to perform surgeries. So really nothing was secured, nothing was convenient, nothing was a comfort over there. And that means that you have to rely on God. Now, the other side of that is, in a culture like that, you also have people who run towards witchcraft rather than God. So both things are at play there. And you end up seeing a lot more spirituality than in first world countries. So I don't know if that helps answer your question a little
Yes,
bit.
that is tremendous expansion and answer. Everything you're saying is just eye-opening. It's heart receiving. And so I just want to hear it. So I want to hear more. But yes, you're answering all our questions with great dialogue, with all the pictures and paintings that you're showing us. And I'm a very faith person. So for me, when I hear people like yourself, anybody who's speaking about God, somebody who knows and believes that with God anything is possible, I just want to hear it because I'm trying to get there. I don't even think I'm there yet.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Um,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
so I don't know. This might serve as a quick testimony, but right before we left from Cuba, we were being held responsible for the cost of leaving from Cuba for the flights until we set foot on American soil. And from there, then the United States was going to loan us what we needed to get us to Kansas City. But we had to come up with $3,000 in a country where people only got paid $10 a month. And so I had a dream that a lady had come to the house and she had a box of filled with dollars. And I had only seen dollars in my lifetime, maybe like once or twice in Cuba. But she had this box full of dollars and she handed it to me and she said, give this to your parents because this is the money that you're gonna use to leave the country. And so the next morning I tell my dad that I had this dream and he became so joyful and he shouted, Amen. We don't have to worry about that
Amen.
anymore. It's done.
It's done.
And sure enough, it was done. Just a week after that, someone offered to give him the money.
Wow.
Wow.
Coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous.
Mhm.
Prayer works.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
I don't mean to interrupt. I mean, that's powerful. That's powerful. Sound like could have been intuition as well. Intuition could have played a part of it, a part in it. I just read this kind of quote that you said. I often found myself searching all over town over 8 hours for eggs to accompany the rice we had for dinner. I mean, 8 hours searching for eggs is so appropriate because this Sunday is Easter. So you got eggs here. You got eggs
All
Yeah.
all around.
all day.
But that's incredible. You said you searched for 8 hours. That just stood out when I read that. It really did. And what you said earlier about rice, because rice is one of those condiments. Believe it or not, I made some rice earlier. Rice it's just one of those things, but piggybacking to well, let me see. It looked like we just got a few more minutes. I don't wanna say too much, but any last words that you cause
Um,
somebody
yeah, go
needs to
ahead.
hear your voice. Somebody out there right now that needs to hear what you had to say. Somebody's begging. Somebody's life could be on the line. Saw a guy this morning. I told Anthony, I was on the phone with Anthony. The guy was asleep at the wheel and all this traffic. Yeah, so when we said somebody needs to hear what you and that guy, it blew my mind. What do you have to say to somebody out
Um,
there?
I think one of the best things that I can say to anybody is don't be afraid. Um, the same way that fear ruled in my country and was overtaken because of fear. The government infused fear against the anti-revolutionaries or anyone who did not like Fidel Castro, anyone who did not see the revolution as their new religion and Fidel Castro as their god. There was fear infused into the people in order to divide them. And that's how they took over to the point to where families were being torn apart. And so fear is one of the worst things that anyone can have and the worst place to make decisions from. And we saw this during the pandemic. Fear literally paralyzed a lot of people. Um, Fear killed a lot of people. I truly believe that. And I just say, don't be afraid. Live your life. Speak. Uh, have a voice. You have an opinion. You have a belief. Speak it. Don't be afraid. That's once somebody is able to keep us quiet and they're able to make us ashamed and afraid, that's when they win. And that's when we fall into slavery. So that's what I would say. Don't be afraid.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know it's about to cut off. I know Tyrone, you want the last words before I cut off? But Grace here, I can't wait to speak to you again, and we will revisit this because it's short-lived because of technical issues. But thank you. God bless you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. You're on mute, Tyrone.
Help us not to be a stumbling block, Lord, and teach us how to relax and have fun, and Lord, and be over Gracie's family, Lord, because they had to endure a lot to get on, for her to get on with us. In Jesus'